Click here to subscribe our channel. Do not forget to press the bell icon to get regular updates of free videos.
So we'll be continuing with the economic survey of 2021-22, and this is lecture number 2. In this lecture we are going to start the sectoral description, sector wise description of the economy, which will include agriculture sector, then industrial sector, and after that service sector. So in that order, not necessarily in the chapter wise. So we started in the first class with the state of the economy. So first I will finish that remaining part of the state of the economy chapter, and then in this lecture we are going to cover the agriculture sector. So economic survey of 2021-22. Lecture number 2. Now before starting this lecture, just I will give you a recap of the first lecture. Just few minutes. So economic survey of 21-22. First chapter is state of the economy, second chapter is fiscal development, third is external sector, monetary management, price and inflation, sustainable development, agriculture and food management, industry, services, and social infrastructure, employment and human development. So these are the 10 chapters, and so in this class we are going to cover the remaining part of the state of the economy. The state of the economy is basically giving an overview of all the chapters, just a brief, and after that this chapter number 7, and then we will proceed to chapter number 8 or 9. So sector wide description is basically chapter 8 and 9, and then fiscal development, external sector development, monetary management, price and inflation, and so on. So in the state of the economy, few basic fact that you have to remember is what is the growth rate and what is the sectoral composition. Growth rate of agriculture, industry and services, and what is their share of agriculture, industry and services in the GDP or gross value added. So the annual growth rate for 2021-22 is for agriculture 3.9, for industry 11.8, and for services 8.2. and as far as recovery is concerned, comparing with the pre-pandemic year, that is 2019-20, in agriculture recovery is 107.7, that is more than that in industry as well as, but in the services we can say that almost everything has not been recovered in terms of the level of service sector contribution. So one important table is basically this. Then other was the share in the sectors in the gross value added. So agriculture and allied contributed 18.8%, industry is contributing around 28%, and services 53%. तो ये दो बेसिक इंफॉर्मेशन रखने हैं, ग्रोथ रेट और उसका सेक्टोरल कंपोजिशन. So what is the share of agriculture, industry and services, and other things in this part was basically sectoral trend, GDP growth rate. So growth rate was given 3.9, 11.8, and the other information was in terms of the demand, that is what is the composition of overall demand, like consumption demand, investment demand, government expenditure demand. So the share of sector in the nominal GDP, that means when you write y equal to c plus I plus g plus x minus m, these are the components of demand. So consumption is contributing around 71.7% in 2019-20, 71.1, and in 2021-22 69.7. So a lower share of private consumption expenditure indicate that per capita income or overall income has reduced, and because of that consumption spending has reduced. So this 2021-22 latest information रखेंगे. Private consumption expenditure 69, out of that government expenditure is 57, total consumption is 69, out of that private is 57 and government is 12.2, and gross fixed capital formation, which is investment, is 29.6, net export negative 3. Clear? And then we explain also the barbell strategy and the key initiatives taken by government in order to counter the impact of COVID. Clear? तो यहाँ तक के जो पॉइंट्स थे वो आपने एक्सप्लेन कर रखा. नाउ रिमेनिंग पार्ट ऑफ दिस चैप्टर नंबर 1 फर्स्ट, starting with the monetary and financial support. Monetary and financial support. So monetary support was basically in terms of lowering the bank rate, lowering the repo rate, reverse repo rate, margin standing facilities. So those were the monetary support. Exact information आपको हमेशा आज की डेट में याद रखना होगा कि what is their actual rate. But last few मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी कमेटी से उसके रेट में अंदर कोई चेंजेस नहीं है. तो एक अकोमोडेटिव स्टांस ऑलरेडी आरबीआई ने ले रखा है. तो बेस्ड अपॉन दैट हाउ यू हैव टू राइट, दैट मीन्स व्हेन यू राइट व्हाट आर द वेरियस मेजर्स टेकन बाय द गवर्नमेंट, देन रिगार्डिंग मॉनेटरी एंड फाइनेंशियल सपोर्ट व्हाट आर द वेरियस मेजर्स. सो अंडर दिस हेडिंग राइट ऑन द फर्स्ट पैराग्राफ, मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी सिंस द आउटब्रेक ऑफ पैंडेमिक. Monetary policy since the outbreak of pandemic was calibrated to provide a cushion and support growth, after comma, but carefully controlled in order to avoid the medium term dislocation of excess liquidity, dislocation of excess liquidity. The Monetary Policy Committee, MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee cut policy repo rate and also reduced marginal standing facility rate and bank rate. Next sentence. RBI in its latest MPC statement has further decided to continue with this accommodative stance. Underline the word accommodative stance, as long as necessary to revive growth on a durable basis. Accommodative means whatever is need of the economy. So if the economy need more liquidity, then central bank will be accommodating that. So in order to revive that growth, whatever is needed, central bank will be accommodating that by increasing the liquidity. Full stop. A number of additional steps were taken throughout the period to ensure that there was adequate liquidity in the system. To allow the central and state government to finance themselves at lower rate. Next paragraph. An important aspect of safety net was the use of government guarantee to provide access to financial support to the economy in general and MSME in particular. Few measures we have written when we are writing the key initiatives taken by the government. Also, combined with a moratorium on insolvency proceedings, after comma, the government was able to avoid a payment log jam that could have caused a cascading effect of default. So there was a moratorium, but government also had to avoid the default case as well. Next paragraph now. In the last 2 years, government leveraged an array of 8 high frequency indicator representing industry, services, global trend, macro stability indicator, and several other activities from both public and private sources to monitor the state of economy on real time basis. And these include, there are certain high frequency indicators. These include electricity generation, scheduled domestic flights, volume value ratio, of financial transaction, capital flows, mobility index, and so on. So there are certain high frequency indicators which are indicator of revival of the economy as well as the growth of the economy. It also covers employment demand. Under Manrega to monitor rural employment condition, especially in the context of migrant workers. Next sentence. While HFI, high frequency indicator, have the advantage of being real time and frequent, they need to be used with care. Because each indicator provides each indicator provides a partial view of development. So that indicator itself is not indicating overall development, so it is just giving a partial view of the development. So related to that, there are various indicators given. Performance of high frequency indicators, like so you can go through with this type of table, but relevant examination के लिए बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं है. जो key points है सिर्फ high value indicators में e-way bill generation, GST collection, power consumption, electronic toll collection count, retail mobility, UPI, ATM transaction. ठीक है, उनका movement given है, like मनरेगा work generated and demand, fuel consumption. So in all type of indicator you find that V-shaped type of recovery. So a slowdown and then a recovery. जैसे जैसे पेंडेमिक मूव कर रहा है उसके अकॉर्डिंगली ये चार्ट भी मूव कर रहे हैं. Clear? So you can read that. Vaccination part you can leave for the important part in this chapter is the macroeconomic stability. So macroeconomic stability will be the next subheading. Macroeconomic stability. So these informations are provided in the context of that now the third wave. ठीक है, जो slowly we can say subside हो रहा है, but उस context में basically information written है. In fact we have to just write you can draw a table here which is basically giving a comparison of 2008-9 financial crisis data, then 2012-13 and 2021-22. मतलब क्राइसिस के बाद का जो पीरियड है वो जो रिकवरी है और उसके बाद का जो फेज़ है, मतलब 2008-9 के क्राइसिस और आफ्टर दैट जो रिकवरी है, तो उस फेज़ को आप ले रहे हैं. और फिर 2021 का मतलब क्राइसिस के बाद का जो फेज़ है वो पार्ट, मतलब जब आफ्टर नाउ वी कैन से वी आर रिकवरिंग, तो 8-9 के बाद के रिकवरी का पार्ट और 2019-20 और पेंडेमिक के बाद के रिकवरी का जो डेटा है उसको कंपेयर किया जा रहा है. सो यू कैन ड्रॉ दिस टेबल. रेलेवेंट इंडिकेटर आई विल बी गिविंग. सो 2008-9 is 1, 2012-13 and 2021-22. CPI inflation, these are in fact global data. 9.1, 9.4 and it is 5.2. So this is April to December of 2021. Then fiscal deficit, gross fiscal deficit 8.3, 6.9, 10.2. Current account balance or current account deficit, you can say CAD. Current account deficit 2.3, negative, minus 4.8 and negative 0.2. Then external debt 20.7, 22.4, 20.2. Foreign exchange reserve, at that time it used to be 252 billion. $52 billion US dollar. 292 and right now it is 634 billion. ठीक है, फॉरेन एक्सचेंज रिजर्व है आरबीआई के पास ऑन 31 दिसंबर 2021. ये तो ये रेलिवेंट जो इंफॉर्मेशन है. की पीरियड इज बेसिकली दिस ग्लोबल फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस एंड द आफ्टर पैंडेमिक डेटा. ठीक है, बिलो दैट टेबल राइट डाउन. Despite all the disruptions caused by global pandemic, India's balance of payment remained in surplus throughout the last 2 year. So we have a balance of payment surplus. This allowed the Reserve Bank of India to accumulate foreign exchange reserve, which stands at 634 billion US dollar reserve. 634 billion US dollar on 31st December 2021. This is equivalent to 13.2 months of import. This is equivalent to 13.2 months of import. 13.2 months of import. That means economy can finance 13.2 months of import by this reserve. So even if India is not earning any foreign exchange reserve further, it can support for the next 13.2 months. And it is higher than country's external debt. So this information are relevant for objective point. या कहीं आप एक्सटर्नल सेक्टर का इंफॉर्मेशन लिख रहे हैं, कंटेक्स्ट लिख रहे हैं, तो वहाँ पे आप इसे पैराग्राफ के फॉर्म में यूज कर सकते हैं. अमाउंट ऑफ फॉरेन एक्सचेंज रिजर्व, हाउ मच इज द इंपोर्ट कवरेज, एंड इट इज ग्रेटर देन द एक्सटर्नल डेट. इंडिया was the fourth largest foreign exchange reserve holder after China, Japan and Switzerland. Clear? Then some information, because this chapter is basically giving an overview of all the areas. वो डिटेल में आप फर्दर जो स्पेसिफिक चैप्टर होगा वहाँ भी एक्सप्लेन करना है. बट दिस स्टेट ऑफ इकोनॉमी, वी मूव टू द फिस्कल बैलेंस. The fiscal support given to the economy, as well as the health response, caused the fiscal deficit and government debt to rise. In 2021. But there has been a strong rebound. In government revenue in 2021-22. The revenue receipts of central government during April to November 2021 has gone up by 67.2%. 67.2% has gone up by 67.2%, as against an estimated growth of 9.2%. as against an estimated growth of 9.2%. So it was budgeted to grow at 9.6, grown up by 67.2, but since वो last जो base होगा वो काफ़ी lower होगा, as compared to that it is 67.2. The tax collection has been buoyant. Tax collection has been buoyant for both direct and indirect tax. For both direct and indirect tax. So we can say there is a tax buoyancy in the economy. Indian tax system is buoyant. Buoyant means actually with the growth there will be increase in the tax collection without any change in the tax rate. So even if the rate will remain same, with economic growth the tax collection goes up. The gross monthly GST collection have crossed 1 lakh crore consistently, since July 2021. Since July 2021. July 2021. Clear? ये fiscal development जो chapter number 2 है, there you will find the detail further about the fiscal, but here you can, the important part is basically this: fiscal and primary deficit. So fiscal deficit for 2019 April to November, that period is being compared, April to November 19, then 20 and 21. So it was 8.1, increased to 10.8 due to pandemic, and for 2021 it is 7. And primary deficit, which is difference of that is your fiscal deficit minus interest payment, is 4.7, 6.9 and 2.4. So you can write that information. Fiscal deficit and primary deficit for 2019, 2020, 2021. Clear? And this is for the period April to November. So for reference उस period को compare किया जा रहा है, April to November, April to November 19, April to November 20, April to November 21. So fiscal deficit was 8.1, 10.8 and 7. Primary deficit 4.7, 6.9, 2.4. So this is an important information. After that, information of financial sector. Financial sector. So related to the capital adequacy ratio, gross non-performing assets. The financial system is always a possible area of stress during turbulent times. The financial system is always a possible area of stress during turbulent times. However, India's capital market have done exceptionally well. And have allowed record mobilization of risk capital for Indian companies. Record mobilization of risk capital for Indian companies. The sensitive index, Sensex and Nifty scaled up to touch its peak in October 2021. Among major emerging market economies, Indian markets outperformed Indian markets outperformed. Indian markets outperformed. Next paragraph. More significantly, the banking system is well capitalized. The banking system is well capitalized, and the overhang of NPA and the overhang of non-performing assets seems to have structurally declined. Seems to have structurally declined. Seems to have structurally declined. The gross non-performing advances, gross non-performing advances, GNPA, gross non-performing advances ratio of scheduled commercial bank continued to decline since 2018-19. Continued to decline since 2018-19. It has decreased from 7.5% in September 2020, 7.9% in September 2020 to 6.9% in September 2021. So gross non-performing advances has reduced for of scheduled commercial bank was earlier 7.9% and now it is 6.9%. So 1% decline. Net non-performing advance ratio has also declined from 6% in 2017-18 to 2.2% in 2021. Simultaneously, capital risk weighted asset ratio, CRAR, capital risk weighted asset ratio of scheduled commercial bank increased from 15.84% in September 2020 to 16.54 in September 2021. 16.54 in September 2021. क्लियर? तो फाइनेंशियल जो सेक्टर होगा, डेवलपमेंट होगा, उसमें और भी इंफॉर्मेशन होंगे चैप्टर 2 के अंदर। फिस्कल वाले सेक्टर के अंदर फाइनेंशियल वाला आपको मॉनेटरी मैनेजमेंट के चैप्टर मिल जाएगा, फर्दर जो मोर डिटेल्स होंगे। बट इन दिस चैप्टर इट इज़ बेसिकली द जो कोर है, वहाँ पे जो मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट डेटा होगा उस चैप्टर के अंदर, वो चैप्टर 1 के अंदर रिप्रोड्यूस होता है, जस्ट टू गिव अ सेंस ऑफ द ओवरऑल इकॉनमी। About inflation there is also, but inflation वाले chapter में we will be covering that, global supply disruption. Another point that is relevant in this chapter number 1 is the supply side reform. You can use this while answering what government policy has been undertaken in order to counter or mitigate the impact of pandemic. So one important aspect is supply side reform. So under this heading, another distinguishing feature of India's economic response has been an emphasis on supply side reform. an emphasis on supply side reform rather than total reliance on demand management, rather than total reliance on demand management. ठीक है, जो भी आप यहाँ लिख रहे हैं वो एक्चुअल में गवर्नमेंट का स्टांस है. तो the focus is basically on the supply side management rather than totally depending upon managing the demand. That means the focus is to increase the supply production. You have to produce more rather than just controlling the or managing the demand side. These supply side reforms include deregulation of various sectors, simplification of process, removal of legacy issues like retrospective tax, privatization, after production linked incentives and so on. So these type of sentence you can directly quote from the survey, that the supply side reforms include. So when you use the word supply side reform, what supply side reform is including? It is including deregulation of various sectors, simplification of the process, removal of the legacy issues like retrospective tax, privatization and production linked incentives. An important theme that has been discussed through the course of economic survey is that of process reform, underline that, process reform. It is important to distinguish between deregulation and process reform. The former relates to, that is deregulation, the former relates to reducing or removing the role of government, from a particular activity, In contrast, the process reform broadly relates to simplification and smoothening of process of activities where the government's presence as a facilitator or regulator is necessary. Government presence as a facilitator or regulator is necessary. So you have to smooth out the process where it is mandatory that a regulator will always be there or government will always be there as a facilitator or a regulator. Next paragraph. The emphasis given to supply side. ये बड़े से वर्ड्स आपको आंसर में यूज़ करने, प्रोसेस रिफॉर्म उसका मीनिंग क्या हुआ, हाउ इट इज़ डिफरेंट फ्रॉम द डीरेगुलेशन, सप्लाई साइड रिफॉर्म इंक्लूड्स विच कंपोनेंट, एंड रादर देन यूजिंग योर ओन वर्ड्स, जो सर्वे के अंदर गिवन है जो लैंग्वेज है एज इट इज़ यूज़ करना. द एम्फेसिस गिवन टू सप्लाई साइड in India's COVID-19 response India's COVID-19 response is driven by two important considerations. Number one, Indian policymakers saw the disruption caused by travel restriction, lockdowns and supply chain lockdowns as an interruption to economy supply side. Also, although this has also squeezed demand, because supply side अगर डिस्टर्ब हो रहा है तो ऑब्वियसली जॉब लॉसनेस होगा, lack of income होगा, lack of income will be resulting into lack of demand also. Although this also squeezed demand, after comma, it is not correct to see the pandemic related economic slowdown as just a demand problem. So it is not just a demand problem, it is basically a supply side problem as well. And second consideration, the post-COVID world will be impacted by a wide variety of factors, including changes in technology, consumer behavior, supply chains, climate change, geopolitics, and so on. Therefore, the post-COVID economy will not be merely a re-inflation of pre-COVID inflation. Is not merely a re-inflation of pre-COVID inflation. So, simply building it back with demand measure is not a solution. Simply building it back with demand measure is not a solution, because over a period there will be changes in the technology, there will be changes in the supply chain, there will be change in the climate. So you need to respond to those changes as well. So it is not only controlled or managed by the demand. Next paragraph. There are two common themes in India's supply side strategy. Common themes in India's supply side strategy. A. Reforms that improve flexibility and innovation in order to deal with long-term unpredictability of post-COVID world. This includes factor market reform, deregulation of sectors like space, drones, geospatial mapping, trade finance factoring, comma process reforms like those in government procurement and in telecommunication sector, removal of retrospective taxes and so on. And second, B, reforms aimed at improving the resilience of Indian economy. Reforms aimed at improving the resilience of Indian economy. So these range from climate environment related policies, social infrastructure like provision of tap water, toilets, basic housing, insurance for poor and so on. Clear? So below that there is a table number 7 given, that is key supply side measures or reform sector wise. So key supply side measures or reform, that was basically the philosophy or idea. Now these are the specifics related to the industry. So what measures or reform has been taken, like production linked incentive scheme approved for 13 sectors. अब ये सारे सेक्टर यूज ना करके हम सिर्फ अगर वो लाइन भी आ रखते हैं तो दैट विल बी इनफ व्हेन यू आर राइटिंग एनी आंसर. रेट्रोस्पेक्टिव टैक्स रिपील्ड, वो रिपीट होकर जो पहले आपने लिख रखा है जो मेजर पॉइंट्स वो समरी के फॉर्म यहाँ बॉक्स में गिवन है. बीपीओ से रिलेटेड मेजर्स क्या है, टेलीकम्युनिकेशन में क्या है, पब्लिक प्रोक्योरमेंट और पॉलिसीज में, एविएशन में, फाइनेंशियल सेक्टर में, एमएसएमई में. तो एमएसएमई का जो चैप्टर होगा इंडस्ट्री के अंदर, वहाँ पे ये पॉइंट्स फर्दर डिटेल में आ जाएंगे, क्या क्या चेंजेस किए गए, उनके डेफिनेशन में क्या चेंज हुआ है. तो इनफैक्ट वो लास्ट ईयर के सर्वे के अंदर जो डिस्कशन था उसके अंदर भी इंक्लूडेड है वो. स्पेशल स्पेशल सेक्टर. So some specifics has been basically given in this table. So you can go through that, but detail ये नहीं कि complete वैसे, because it will be impractical. ठीक है, वो आपने पूरा लिखा unless you are not able to reproduce it in the form of answer. तो जो key points होंगे वो आपको लिखना है, जो idea है वो basically आपने से पहले लिख रखा है. Clear? At the end of this chapter, it is giving a forecast, that is growth outlook. So some basic facts related to the growth outlook you can write. Growth outlook. So futuristic, what are the expectations? The Indian economy is estimated to grow at 9.7% in real term. 9.7% in real term in 2021-22. 9.2% in real term in 2021-22. ठीक है, as compared to the contraction of 7.3 in the previous year. Growth in 2022-23. Will be supported by widespread vaccine coverage, comma gains from supply side reform, and easing of regulations, comma robust export growth, and availability of fiscal space, to increase capital expenditure. to increase capital expenditure. So this was basically the idea given in the economic survey, and it is being reflected in the budget when government capital expenditure has been increased significantly. The above projections is comparable with the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank latest forecast of real GDP growth of 8.7%, 8.7% and 7.5% respectively for 2022-23. So World Bank is forecasting a growth rate of 8.7, Asian Development 7.5 for 2022-23 for Indian economy. IMF in its latest World Economic Outlook project India's growth at 9% in 2021-22 and 22-23. So in both year 9%, 21-22 and 22-23, and 7.1% in 2023-24. So next 2-3 year के projection given है 7.1% in 2023-24. Clear? So this was all about the chapter number 1. So chapter number 1 basically concludes there. तो जो की इन्फॉर्मेशन है, रिमेंबर सर्वे के साथ इशू होगा कि इसमें फैक्ट बहुत सारे होंगे, इंटरप्रिटेशन भी होगा, एनालिसिस भी है. जो की पॉइंट्स है जो आपको अपने नोटबुक में रखना है वो डेटा आपके नोटबुक में होना चाहिए, और जो की सेंटेंसेज हैं, पैराग्राफ है, जैसे हमें यूज़ करना अपने आंसर के लिए, वो भी आपके नोटबुक में होना चाहिए. मतलब अंडरलाइन जो वहाँ कर रखा है उसको अपने नोटबुक में लिखना है, और फिर उस नोटबुक को आपको रिपीटेडली पढ़ना है. फैक्ट वैसे याद नहीं होता अनलेस अगर आप उसे बार बार पढ़ने की आदत नहीं डेवलप करते. इन अ वीक और 15 डेज अगर आप बार बार रिवाइज नहीं कर रहे हो तो फाइनल एग्जाम में रफ जो ब्रॉडर डेटा है लाइक जीडीपी ग्रोथ रेट, सेक्टोरल कंपोजिशन, वो सब तो याद रहेंगे, बट जो माइन्यूट डेटा होगा वो याद नहीं रहेगा. तो आपको एक जगह नोटबुक में रख के उसको रिपीटेडली लर्न करना है. सो दिस वाज चैप्टर नंबर 1. So now we'll be starting with the sectoral description. Sectoral means agriculture sector contribution on the issue related with agriculture, then industry, and then services. So this is your chapter number 7. Chapter number 7 in economic survey. Agriculture and food management. Agriculture and food management. So 7th chapter. So some information related to agriculture we have written in the state of economy, that is chapter 1. Like agriculture growth rate, last year it was 3.6, current year it is 3.9. So pandemic period maybe agriculture was the only sector which witnessed the positive growth rate, and its growth rate has increased from 3.6 to 3.9. Share of agriculture in the GDP 18.8 और 18.2%. तो वो डेटा आपको यहाँ पे रिपीट होके मिलेगा, वो इन्फॉर्मेशन रखना है. फिर एक्सपोर्ट में उसका शेयर क्या होगा, एम्प्लॉयमेंट में क्या शेयर है, फूड मैनेजमेंट से रिलेटेड क्या क्या इश्यूज हैं. सो विद इन फॉर एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर जो फर्स्ट पैराग्राफ होगा इंट्रोडक्टिव पार्ट में, we can write agriculture growth. So related to that agriculture growth, ग्राफ के टर्म में भी आप इसको याद रख सकते हैं, ऑपोजिट भी कर सकते हो आंसर में। ग्रोथ ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर एंड द अलाइड सेक्टर, सो इन 2020-21 3.6, 21-22 3.9, प्री पैंडेमिक 4.3, before that 2018-19 2.6. so last 4-5 year का agriculture growth rate you can write it here, agriculture growth, agriculture growth rate, agriculture and allied sector 2016-17, 2017-18, 18-19, 2019-20, 2020-21 and 21-22. so 16 it was 6.8, 6.6, 2.6, 4.3, 3.6 and 2021-22 this is 3.9. so current agriculture growth rate is 3.9. right on the first paragraph here, the agriculture sector has experienced buoyant growth in past 2 year, the sector which is largest employer of workforce, accounted for a sizable 18.8% in gross value added. So share of agriculture and allied in gross value added is 18.8% in 2021-22. The sector which is largest employer of workforce accounted for a sizable 18.8% in gross value added, registered a growth of 3.9% in 2021-22. in 2021-22. so this sentence or paragraph you can say is in providing all basic information related to the agriculture, its importance for the Indian economy, which is in terms of its contribution, sustained positive growth, share in the workforce and the share in the gross value added. Next paragraph, the measures taken by government to augment production and domestic supply of oilseeds and edible oils, interventions made in sugar sector, and promotion of crop diversification, has been important for sustaining agriculture growth, Next paragraph, remember the key points in the agriculture sector will be the problem with the agriculture sector. That means you can understand this agriculture sector in this way. One will be the issue related to the input. By using those input, agriculture production will take place, and after that production the problem is regarding with its sale. So input like raw material, fertilizers, insecticides, power, irrigation, credit, those are the issues related to the input. And once production will take place, at what price to sell and where to sell to whom to sell, that will be the other issue. So you can divide, मतलब broader view ऐसे रखेंगे, inputs related issues होंगे और उसके sales related issues होंगे in the agriculture sector. So most important part is basically the investment. So that investment which will be basically helping in creating the agriculture sector infrastructure. So that part, investment in agriculture, is important. Next paragraph, investment is critical to growth of a sector. Investment is critical to growth of a sector. The gross capital formation in agriculture, gross capital formation or simply investment, the gross capital formation in agriculture and allied sector has been showing a fluctuating trend, has been showing a fluctuating trend, has been showing a fluctuating trend. While public investment has remained stable, while public investment has remained stable, public investment has remained stable between 2-3%, between 2 to 3% over the years, the private investment has fluctuated, the private investment has fluctuated, and total agriculture gross capital formation, and total agriculture gross capital formation has moved according to variation in private investment, according to variation in private investment. So that fluctuation is because of fluctuation in the private investment, not because of fluctuation in the public investment or government investment. Next paragraph, recognizing that there exists a direct correlation, between capital investment in agriculture, and its growth rate, after comma, there should be a focused and targeted approach, there should be a focused and targeted approach to ensure higher public and private investment, to ensure higher public and private investment in the sector. Full stop. Higher access to concessional institutional credit. So another part is basically that credit. Higher access to concessional institutional credit to farmer, and greater participation of private corporate sector, greater participation of private corporate sector may help in improving private investment in agriculture, So this table of number 5 is a percentage share of gross capital formation in agriculture and allied relative to its gross value added. So जो वैल्यू एडेड है एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर का उसके परसेंटेज के फॉर्म में. So this red one is basically for the public, lower one that is stable between 2 to 3, so 2.4 to 2.7. Private sector is a little bit fluctuating, and the total, that is green line, the first one. Currently gross fixed capital formation as a percentage of its gross value added, 2.7 for public, 14.3, and that total. ट्रेंड वाइज कभी कभी स्टेटमेंट में फैक्ट नहीं होते, जस्ट ट्रेंड को एक्सप्लेन करने के लिए होता है, तो जस्ट फोकस ऑन दिस टाइप ऑफ ग्राफ एज वेल, बिकॉज जो पिक्चर होगा उसका इमेज जो फैक्ट है उसके में से ज़्यादा प्रोलॉन्ग रहेगा, प्रेजेंट करने के लिए भी वो ईजी रहेगा। अगर आप फैक्ट डायरेक्टली याद नहीं है, एग्जैक्टली याद नहीं है, तो एटलीस्ट यू कैन प्रेजेंट द ट्रेंड। ठीक है, अब जो अलग अलग टॉपिक वाइज है, लाइक एडेबल ऑयल्स के लिए क्या क्या किए गए थे, वो सारे इन्फॉर्मेशन आप इफ़ यू आर इंटरेस्टेड यू कैन गो इन डिटेल, बट क्वेश्चन के लिए वो डायरेक्टली उसका इंपॉर्टेंस नहीं है। बट वन क्वेश्चन और वन सेक्टर दैट विल बी इम्पॉर्टेंट इज बेसिकली द फूड प्रोसेसिंग। ये क्वेश्चन अभी लास्ट वाले मेंस में, जो करंट लास्ट मंथ में जो मेंस हुआ है 2021 का, उसके अंदर क्वेश्चन है व्हाट गवर्नमेंट मेजर्स हैज बीन टेकन related to the food processing sectors. So these type of question you can answer directly from the survey. But before that, is it heading by price policy? That is MSP, minimum support price. The government's price policy for major agricultural commodities seeks to ensure a remunerative price. Underline that. A remunerative price to the growers for their produce. A remunerative price to the growers for their produce. But there is a lot of controversy. What is the remunerative price? Cost plus some profit margin, but which cost to include? So there are a lot of confusion related to that. Whether you are including only the input, that is seeds, fertilizer, insecticides that you buy, labor that you hire, or also include the rent of that land, also include the rent of the capital equipment used, also include the opportunity cost of that workers time or the landowner's time. So there are various costs, that is cost must be very comprehensive. ठीक है, वो एग्रीकल्चर वाले सेक्टर में आप डिटेल में एक्सप्लेन करेंगे, जहाँ पे कॉम्प्रहेंसिव कॉस्ट प्लस प्रॉफिट मार्जिन होना चाहिए। दैट मीन्स व्हेन यू से दैट यू हैव टू डबल द इनकम, so when you try to double the income, the problem is related to the cost plus some margin of profit. But what are those cost? अगर हमने cost के कुछ component ignore कर रखे हैं, तो उसमें 50% ऐड भी अगर कर दिया है, तो फाइनल जो MSP आएगा that will be lower. But if you define this cost comprehensively, then the final MSP that will come out, that will be higher. So how to define this cost? I repeat, the government's price policy for major agriculture commodities seeks to ensure a remunerative price to the growers for their produce with a view to encourage higher investment and production, and thereby to safeguard the interest of consumer by making available supplies at a reasonable price. So the objective of price policy is to protect the interest of consumer as well as to protect the interest of producer. The government fixes MSP of 22 mandated agriculture crop. So remember that the government fixes MSP of 22 mandated agricultural crop on the basis of recommendation of Commission for Agriculture Cost and Price, CACP, Commission for Agriculture Cost and Price, underline that, and after due consideration of the views of a state government. So CSCP recommends it then in consultation with the state government. Due consideration of the views of the state government and the concerned central ministries or departments. Concerned central ministries and department. While recommending MSP, CSCP considers important factors like cost of production, overall demand supply condition, domestic and international prices, intercrop price stability or intercrop price parity, terms of trade between agriculture and non-agriculture sector, and the likely effect on rest of economy, So when CSCP recommends minimum support price, it is not just taking into account the cost of production is one thing, demand supply gap is another, domestic and international price, intercrop price parity, so you have to maintain a parity, then terms of trade between agriculture and non-agriculture sectors. So terms of trade means price of agriculture good upon price of non-agriculture good. So that ratio is basically the terms of trade. At what rate you can exchange 1 unit of agriculture product with non-agriculture product. So that is the terms of trade. So all those factors are taken into account when CSCP recommends MSP. So that was the basic idea. मतलब वो पैराग्राफ रेलिवेंट है, उसको आप प्राइसिंग पॉलिसी से रिलेटेड कोई क्वेश्चन अगर आप लिख रहे हैं, यू कैन यूज दैट. Agriculture credit में how much agriculture credit has been given, etc. That information is there. There is a term for sweet revolution. You can read that box number 1 in this chapter. Sweet revolution. Basically, it is the importance of beekeeping. National Bee Board, which is being implemented through National Bee Board. So, sweet revolution is related to beekeeping. Just write down the basic fact here. Keeping in view the importance of beekeeping, as part of integrated farming system, IFS, in the country, government approved allocation of 500 crore for National Beekeeping and Honey Mission, NBHM, for 3 years, that is 2021 to 2023. The mission was announced as part of ANB scheme, National beekeeping and honey mission NBHM aims for overall promotion and development of scientific beekeeping in the country to achieve the goal of sweet revolution which is being implemented through National Bee Board. क्लियर? तो जस्ट फ्यू इंफॉर्मेशन नए टर्म याद रखेंगे, मतलब एग्रीकल्चर एंड अलाइड सेक्टर के ग्रोथ को अगर दैट मीन्स द फोकस नॉट ओनली ऑन द कोर एग्रीकल्चर एंड द अलाइड एज वेल. Then situational assessment survey has been given, you can ignore that part. One question is basically you can refer to this food processing sector. ठीक है, ये क्वेश्चन अभी मेंस के अंदर ये कंपल्सरी क्वेश्चन के सेक्शन में था. We'll just show you the question first. ठीक है, क्वेश्चन आपको पेपर 2 में लास्ट 2021 के पेपर में ठीक है, पोर्टल पे अपलोडेड होगा ये क्वेश्चन. सेकंड पेपर आई थिंक द क्वेश्चन वाज इन सेकंड सेक्शन बी. Yes, analyze the new initiatives taken by the government of India to boost food processing sector. New initiatives taken by government of India to boost food processing sector. remember इस तरीके के क्वेश्चन जब आप मिलते हैं, मतलब इट इज़ नॉट कि वो मेन जो सोर्सेज हैं उसके अंदर नहीं है. मेन जो सोर्सेज है वहाँ जहाँ डिटेल एक्सप्लेनेशन होगा जिस सेक्टर का, वो क्वेश्चन आप एक्सपेक्ट कर सकते हो. सो यू कैन एक्सपेक्ट दिस टाइप ऑफ क्वेश्चन फूड प्रोसेसिंग सेक्टर के लिए. So what are the key initiatives taken? So we can add that for food processing sector. So just add the basic information that what is the importance of that food processing sector for agriculture and allied sector overall, and that what initiatives has been taken by the government. Write down. During the last 5 years ending 2019-20, last 5 years ending 2019-20, food processing industries sector has been growing at an average annual growth rate of 11.18%. So the sector constituted as much as 9.87% of gross value added in manufacturing in 2019-20. 9.87% of gross value added in manufacturing. So manufacturing का जो gross value added है उसमें 9.87% का शेयर होगा for food processing industries. Food processing industries food processing industry is one of the major employment intensive segment having a share of 12.38% in the employment generated in all registered factory sector. Full stop. According to the latest annual survey of industries, ASI, according to the latest annual survey of industries, the total number of persons engaged in registered food processing sector was 19.33 lakh, and thereby its share in employment in the unregistered manufacturing sector is 14.18%, with employment of 51.11 lakh. Unregistered में 51.11 lakh worker. Next paragraph. In food processing industries, 100% FDI is permitted. तो जब आपकी इनिशिएटिव्स लिख रहे हैं गवर्नमेंट के साइड से तो 100% FDI has been permitted. In food processing industries, 100% FDI is permitted under the automatic route. However, in case of trading in respect of food product, food products manufactured in India, including through e-commerce, 100% FDI is allowed under government approval route. The sector has witnessed FDI equity inflow. of 4.99 billion US dollar, 4.99 billion during 2014 to 2021, 4.99 billion between 2014 to 2021. Next paragraph. Under the A&B scheme, Ministry of Food Processing Industries has launched a new centrally sponsored scheme, PMFME, that is Prime Minister Formalization of Micro Food Processing Enterprise. Underline that. With a total outlay of 10,000 crore. Over the period 2020 to 25. ठीक है, तो ये स्पेसिफिक प्रोग्राम, एक तो एफडीआई की पॉइंट को लिखना है, दूसरा इस प्रोग्राम से रिलेटेड लिखना है। मतलब अगर आप एग्जैक्टली इस तरीके के आंसर को वहाँ पे प्रोड्यूस कर देते वैसे कंपल्सरी क्वेश्चन में हार्डली 150 वर्ड यू हैव टू राइट, तो अगर वो फैक्चुअली करेक्ट हो, मतलब जो इन्फॉर्मेशन आप लिख रहे हैं व्हाट गवर्नमेंट मेजर्स हैज बीन टेकन फॉर फूड प्रोसेसिंग सेक्टर, देन यू आर बेसिकली जस्टिफाइंग दैट क्वेश्चन। अदरवाइज जनरल आइडिया से भी आप लिख सकते हैं, बट यू हैव टू बी वेरी स्पेसिफिक देयर। अंडर द स्कीम वन डिस्ट्रिक्ट वन प्रोडक्ट, one district one product ODOP, under the scheme one district one product status, under the scheme one district one product status for 137 unique products, 137 unique products in 710 district, in 710 district has been approved by ministry, has been approved by ministry. Next paragraph. Under the umbrella central sector scheme, under the umbrella central sector scheme, under the umbrella central sector scheme PMKSY, PMKSY, that is प्रधानमंत्री किसान संपदा योजना, प्रधानमंत्री किसान संपदा योजना, प्रधानमंत्री किसान संपदा योजना। Under the umbrella central sector scheme PMKSY, the ministry is implementing, the ministry is implementing, the ministry is implementing various component schemes, various component schemes, various component schemes including a mega food park, mega food park, B integrated cold chain and value addition infrastructure, integrated cold chain and value addition infrastructure, C infrastructure for agro processing cluster, infrastructure for agro processing cluster, D creation of backward and forward linkages, backward and forward linkages, E creation and expansion of food processing and preservation capacity, creation and expansion of food processing and preservation capacity. Next, operation green and food testing laboratories, food testing laboratories, food testing laboratories। तो इतने सारे फैक्ट आपको वो पता होना चाहिए कि अंडर PMKSY what are the various points included। तो इस तरीके के जो मतलब FDI का पॉइंट एक लिखना है, एक PMFME का पॉइंट लिखना है, और उससे पहले आपको उसका जो इम्पोर्टेंस है इकोनॉमी के अंदर वो शो करना है। ठीक है, सो इन दिस क्लास विल बी क्लोजिंग हियर। द रिमेनिंग पार्ट इन दिस एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर इज बेसिकली द फूड मैनेजमेंट। तो दिस चैप्टर इज बेसिकली एग्रीकल्चर एंड फूड मैनेजमेंट। सो विल बी डूइंग इन द नेक्स्ट क्लास फूड मैनेजमेंट पार्ट ऑफ दिस चैप्टर एंड देन द सर्विस और इंडस्ट्री चैप्टर। विल टेक एनी वन। So in the first two lecture we have explained the state of the economy and the agriculture part. So next is food management, and after that will be either industry or services. Clear? तो जो भी टॉपिक यहाँ एक्सप्लेन किया है, जो डेटा आप रिसेंटली देख रहे हैं उसको आप जो भी लेक्चर आपने पहले ओल्ड भी देख रखे हैं तो उसमें अपडेट करना है। ठीक है, मतलब पेपर 2 के अंदर ये काम आपको रेगुलर बेसिस पे करने हैं। जब भी इकोनॉमिक सर्वे आ गया, बजट आ गया, जो लेटेस्ट इन्फॉर्मेशन अवेलेबल हो गए तो आपके पास जो भी रिटन मटेरियल है इससे पहले का उसको अपडेट करते जाना है। मतलब वहाँ पे एक पैराग्राफ यहाँ ऐड करना है, कुछ न्यू इन्फॉर्मेशन है तो वो ऐड कीजिए, जो न्यू टेबल है डेटा है वो वहाँ पे ऐड करना है। ठीक है, ये वर्क आपको रेगुलर बेसिस पे करने पड़ेंगे फॉर पेपर 2। ठीक है, तो जो भी लेक्चर आपने ऑलरेडी देख रखा है एग्रीकल्चर का या देख रहे हैं तो वहाँ पे आपको ये कंटेंट ऐड करना है। मतलब इकोनॉमिक सर्वे मैंने लास्ट ईयर का जो डिस्कशन है वो भी अपलोड किया हुआ है साइट पे, इनफैक्ट लास्ट टू लास्ट ईयर वाला भी अपलोडेड है। तो अगर आप सीक्वेंस में सर्वे देखना चाहते हैं तो ठीक है, उससे लास्ट 2 ईयर वाले भी देख सकते हो, और करंट वाले तो आपको वैसे भी करनी है। सो विल कंटिन्यू विद दिस इन द थर्ड लेक्चर। थैंक यू।